Okay, look, I have finally pieced together the massive puzzle that has literally been keeping me awake at night. After endlessly analyzing every single narrative thread, poring over every leaked detail, and really diving deep into the logical implications of multiversal timeline mechanics, I've found the connective tissue. It all connects. I'm going to explain exactly how a time-displaced Steve Rogers, the arrival of the Fantastic Four, and the terrifying emergence of Doctor Doom are all intimately, permanently linked. Let me explain this to you because what we're about to unpack here fundamentally rewrites everything we thought we knew about the fallout of the Infinity Saga. It's absolutely wild.
Right, so I want you to just close your eyes and visualize this incredibly visceral opening scene, really setting the stage for a crisis unlike any we have ever witnessed before. We open on this unknown, highly advanced ship. Thor, the literal god of thunder, is standing there. He's carrying both Stormbreaker and Mjolnir, but he is battered, he is exhausted, and he's pushed entirely to the brink. The ship's alarms are just blaring in the background, but he completely ignores them. He just looks out into the void, and he delivers a line laced with sheer desperation. He says, "We're gonna need a miracle." I mean, think about that. This isn't the confident, arrogant god we used to know. This is a being who has stood toe-to-toe with Thanos and survived, yet now he finds himself facing a threat so insurmountable that he is openly begging the universe for a lifeline.
And then, against all odds, the impossible happens. Out of the shadows, a calm, familiar voice simply says, "Hey pal," and Steve Rogers steps into the light. But you gotta realize, this isn't the clean-cut Captain America of the 1940s, nor is it that old man we saw on the bench. He's sporting longer hair, a rugged beard, dressed in surprisingly modern civilian clothing, like a dark bomber jacket over a dark t-shirt. As he steps forward, Mjolnir just violently zips directly into his waiting hand. Steve looks down at the hammer, a quiet, knowing smile crossing his face, before looking back up at Thor. And this is absolutely crucial. Standing directly behind Steve in this vessel is Johnny Storm of the Fantastic Four. Just let that image sink in for a second.
Now, in response to this literal miracle standing right in front of him, Thor is visibly terrified. He's utterly shocked, and he mutters the phrase, "That's not possible." But I want us to really think about this reaction. Why on earth would Thor say that? Thor is a cosmic god, right? He's lived through the blip. He participated in a massive quantum time heist. He has witnessed multiversal crossovers firsthand. So why would the mere concept of seeing his friend Steve Rogers again completely shatter his reality to the point of absolute disbelief? Thor's terror here is a massive clue. He isn't saying it's impossible that Steve is physically standing there. No, he's reacting to something far more horrifying connected to Steve's arrival. But don't worry, we're gonna get to that terrifying truth shortly.
Okay, let's move on to the mechanics of the return.
Okay, let's dive into this by first addressing the physical reality of what we're actually looking at. Before we can understand the terrifying consequences of Steve's arrival, we have to understand the exact mechanics of his return. Like, how does a man who stayed in the mid-20th century physically jump to a futuristic ship in the middle of a present-day multiversal crisis? Well, let's break down the logical quantum mechanics of this maneuver step by step. Remember, Steve is, above all else, a master tactician. When Bruce Banner built that new quantum tunnel to return the Infinity Stones, Scott Lang and Hank Pym would have absolutely been on standby to produce as many Pym particle vials as necessary. Steve went back to 1970, right? To Camp Lehigh. And he explicitly grabbed extra vials. After nearly running out of particles during the initial time heist, there is literally zero chance the team sent Steve on a solo, multi-era mission without redundant contingency vials. He used one to stay in 1949 with Peggy for sure, but he absolutely kept a reserve vial and his quantum wrist tech strapped to him. When the current crisis hit, he simply activated that tech, pulling himself from his alternate reality directly into the present conflict. It's actually a brilliant, perfectly logical contingency plan.
So, that brings us right into our next big point, the butterfly effect of 1949.
So, the crucial point we need to establish is that Steve's journey wasn't just a simple trip backwards. It wasn't just a relocation. It was an action of catastrophic multiversal creation. Let's be very clear about the timeline logic established by the Ancient One herself. When a major, anomalous change is made to the past, a branch timeline forms. It creates a completely separate universe. Now, there was this flawed kind of early theory floating around that Steve simply lived his life quietly in the background of our main sacred timeline. But let's seriously look at the horrific implications of that. If Steve lived in the background of our history, it means he sat on his hands and allowed his best friend Bucky to be tortured and brainwashed by Hydra for decades. It means he allowed 9/11 to happen. He allowed Howard and Maria Stark to be brutally murdered. That completely fundamentally betrays everything Steve Rogers is as a human being. Therefore, his choice to stay in 1949 absolutely undeniably ripped a brand new branch in the multiverse.
And you know what?
I figured out exactly what that branch is. When Steve decided to stay in 1949, the reality that splintered off from his choice became Earth 828. Yep, that is the precise alternate universe that serves as the home to the Fantastic Four. Steve's decision was the literal nexus event that birthed their entire world.
Now, let's explore exactly how that happened in Forging a Better World step by step.
I want to invite you to just walk through this alternate history with me for a minute. What actually happens when a morally unyielding super soldier operates freely in the 1950s? I mean, Steve wouldn't just sit in a suburban house doing crosswords. He would actively rewrite global events to ensure the horrors he witnessed in his own timeline never ever came to pass. Let's slowly trace this newly forged timeline. In the fall of 1949, Steve reunites with Peggy Carter in Washington, D.C. They take some time for themselves, sure, and around 1954, right about the time Steve is probably riding around on that classic 1950 Triumph T100 motorcycle we all know he loves, they have a son. Let's say he's likely named Jim, honoring James Buchanan Barnes. By the time we reach 1961, the global landscape is completely unrecognizable from our own. Because of Steve's influence behind the scenes, the space race takes a vastly different turn. NASA doesn't even exist. Instead, an agency called ANSA leads the charge, eventually launching the Fantastic Four into the cosmos.
Just imagine Steve Rogers, fully aware of the impending, terrifying Cold War, marching directly up to key historical figures like J. Robert Oppenheimer and Louis Strauss. He looks them dead in the eye and says, "We do not have to make the super. We don't have to make the hydrogen bomb. We can just stop right now." A man with Steve's impeccable credentials, his sheer presence, armed with exact future knowledge, would systematically dismantle the arms race before it even started. He would ruthlessly root out Hydra before they could ever infiltrate S.H.I.E.L.D. By acting on his knowledge, Steve effectively erases the entire Cold War from Earth 828's history entirely. He fixes it.
But as we know, multiversal physics demand a balancing act. You can't just change everything without a reaction. Steve's very presence as a massive anomaly in the timeline caused huge multiversal ripples. It's actually highly probable that the specific cosmic radiation that bombarded Reed, Sue, Johnny, and Ben out in space was a direct side effect of Steve's timeline incursion. He inadvertently generated the very cosmic rays that empowered the Fantastic Four. And because they emerged to form the future foundation and effectively unite this world in peace, Steve successfully built a timeline where the world no longer required Captain America. He created a beautiful, utopian world where he could finally, truly, just be a father.
But things don't stay perfect forever. Let's jump to the Convergence of 1969. Let's see how this builds, because honestly, utopias never last forever in the multiverse. The consequences of Steve's massive anomaly begin to compound, and they start compounding in a very, very dark direction. Tracking the timeline forward to the late 1960s, we see the next generation arrive. In 1965, Reed and Sue's son, Franklin Richards, is born. The world is peaceful, it's thriving. But then, in 1969, that idyllic illusion is completely shattered. A devastating arrival occurs that rocks the very foundations of Earth 828. Dr. Doom emerges from the shadows. And by 1970, the heroes of this universe are forced into a desperate, frantic alliance.
And here is my massive theory on how this deeply, tragically intertwines our characters. When Dr. Doom strikes, he doesn't just target the Fantastic Four. No, Doom is smarter than that. He targets the anomalies. Doom kidnaps Franklin Richards, yes, but he also kidnaps Steve Rogers' now teenage son, Jim. This is a deeply personal attack, and it completely shatters Steve's quiet retirement. The man who willingly laid down the shield is violently forced back into the fight, furious, heartbroken, and completely desperate to save his child. Let me just paint the picture of this incredible detective-style corkboard moment for you. Steve Rogers, seeking answers and help, storms into the Baxter Building to find the Fantastic Four. While they're frantically comparing notes, trying to figure out who took their kids, the sky literally tears open and Thor falls through a multiversal rift directly into their lobby. As these iconic heroes sit together on the Baxter Building couch, trading information about this mysterious, highly advanced armored villain, a horrifying shared realization washes over all of them. They aren't just fighting a random tyrant. They realize they share the exact same horrific tragedy. Every single one of them. All of their children are missing. And this brilliantly illustrates our final piece, the true miracle and consequence.
This whole situation brilliantly and kind of sickeningly illustrates the ultimate tragic irony of Steve's quest for a peaceful life. Every action has an equal and opposite multiversal reaction. So as we prepare to drop the final, most terrifying piece of this puzzle, let's rewind and revisit that opening scene on the ship. Thor saying, "That's not possible." I told you earlier he wasn't scared of Steve returning. No, Thor is paralyzed by what Steve's alternate timeline accidentally allowed to manifest. Thor is looking directly at the horrifying ripple effect of Steve's 1949 decision standing right in front of him.
Because here is the absolute crux of the anomaly. Because Earth 828 was a branch spawned entirely by Steve's interference, it was an accidental universe. It was a reality that, strictly speaking, should never ever have existed. And because it was a forced anomaly, the natural cosmic order of how souls are distributed across the infinite multiverse was deeply, profoundly broken. It got its wires crossed.
And this, right here, brings us to the climactic, absolute heartbreaking reveal. In the sacred timeline, a soul of unparalleled brilliance, ego, and talent was perfectly sorted to become Tony Stark, Earth's greatest defender. But in the broken, anomalous reality of Earth 828, the very reality that Steve created for his own happiness, that exact same soul was improperly sorted. It didn't go to the Starks. It was born in Liberia, and it grew up to become Victor Von Doom. Steve Rogers' deeply personal quest for a happy ending, his desire for peace, directly caused his greatest ally's face to become the multiverse's greatest, most ruthless nightmare. It's devastating.
Now bring the entire narrative full circle with me. When Thor stands on that ship, totally exhausted and broken, and says, "That's not possible," he isn't saying it to Steve. He is looking past him. He is looking at the villain they are hunting. He is looking at Victor Von Doom, who is staring back at him with the exact undeniable face of his dead best friend, Tony Stark. The sheer psychological horror of seeing the man who sacrificed himself to save the entire universe, now standing before them as its potential destroyer, that is what truly breaks the God of Thunder in that moment.
Which leaves us with a lingering, deeply haunting question, doesn't it? Steve Rogers inadvertently built a utopia that birthed an absolute demon. Now alongside Thor and the Fantastic Four, they have to confront the horrific consequences of playing with time. Are these heroes emotionally, let alone physically prepared to fight a ruthless, calculated villain who is wearing the exact face of their ultimate savior? I mean, really think about it. How do you destroy the man who literally gave up everything so you could live? That is the true anomaly here, and that is the absolutely terrifying reality they must now face.